Hi guys, my name is Nessan Costello. I'm a PhD student here under Dr. Ben Jones and Dr. Kevin Dayton. I just want to say thanks to Ben and Kevin today for giving me the chance to speak. Really excited to be here. I realise you guys have been sitting in a long room for a long time, so just to bring it back to your attention, bring it back to nutrition as well, so a change of topic. Every single person in this room on average eats for 67 minutes a day across your lifespan. That's 3.5 years. If you're looking at an adolescent player eating between 3 and 6 times a day, that's 2,000 to 4,000 meals a year. So you've got a huge opportunity if you get nutrition right to really maximise player development, health and performance. Obviously, likewise, if you get that wrong, massive opportunity to screw that up, for want of a better word. So to start off with, I really want to briefly outline the kinematic and metabolic demands of adolescent match play. I think the guys have done a much better job than me, but I'll quickly briefly outline that. The data I'm presenting is relevant to under 19 players, because that's who I work with. Discuss energy intake requirements, energy expenditure requirements, and outline some practical and hopefully useful applications for you guys to go away with to make sure your players are eating enough food to optimise their development and performance. So to start with, as you can see on the board behind me, the weekly kinematic demands of the under-19s and first team down at Rhinos, these were the hardest weeks that both of these teams prepared. As you can see, they're remarkably similar. So our adolescent players are going through large kinematic or professional kinematic demands. To put that into context as well, 3 of those gym sessions were early morning sessions, which had a large effect on their nutritional intake, which I'll talk about in a minute. We already know from the literature that these hard professional kinematic and metabolic demands cause large amounts of exercise and match-induced muscle damage. This results in neuromuscular decreased function, as Greg was talking about, indirect markers of muscle damage, perceived muscle soreness, which can persist up to 4 days after a match, and this has shown no attenuation across the season. So our players are going into training and doing training sessions where they're sore. So what nutritional interventions can we look at to try and improve that recovery? Put into perspective as well is that these guys are going through the biggest stage of growth since the age of 2. Going through huge different body changes. The work that Josh Jones has done, Ben and Kev, looking at increased lean mass and momentum for players. They're trying to put on huge amounts of body weight at the same time as meeting their training demands. Extreme external time commitments. They're at school all day, so Charlotte touched a lot on this earlier, did a really good job of that. So they're at school, there might be apprenticeships, they work, so they've got fit training and preparation for training around those demands. Independent constraints, and what I mean by this is your player educationally wise? Do they have the knowledge to prepare themselves? Do they have a car? How are they getting around to training? Can they bring food to training or not? Do they have financial constraints? And this last one is they're adolescents. They're going through huge peer changes. They're facing loads of different extreme stresses, as Charlotte touched on. So your take-home message is that elite adolescent players face professional kinematic and metabolic demands, plus huge amounts of adolescent stresses. Now this puts a lot of stress on the individual, and this can have a lot of indications. So this is data I collected in pre-season with Lee Rhino's Academy. This physical and psychological stress caused decrease in nutritional intake, timing and quality. It caused, especially on early morning training sessions, they had decreased sleep length and sleep quality. And overall this led to decreases in well-being, so how can we maximise that? And then this, for some players, led to them to lose body weight and decrease lean mass gains. So there's that opposite of what we want the players to be achieving. All of these things I presented look very similar to the relative energy deficiency in sport model, which I outlined by Mountjoy in 2014. Most of this is kind of looking at endurance runners. No one tends to look at it for contact or collision-based sports, but these guys are expending so many calories. Are they actually consuming enough to maintain weight? As you can see, the consequences of not hitting or maintaining energy availability is massive. So it could be maintaining weight, immunological function, health, bone mass, etc. So the consequences are massive. Now you can look at that as a negative, but I see these stresses as a really big positive for player development. So they've got high physical stress, high psychological stress. If you actually couple that with the 3 T's of nutrition, or good nutrition, which I'm going to explain about on the next slide, you can really get good super compensation, adaptation. And I think you'll see is that the players change from under 14, under 16 to under 19 or under 21 in rugby union. Those changes are huge. So your take-home message is that we want to see it as a positive, these stresses, and we want to make sure we put good pillars of foundation for nutrition and sleep in place that they can rebound. So what are the 3 T's of good nutrition? So anyone who's aware of nutrition research, especially stuff coming out of Liverpool John Moores, this is stuff that they talk about a lot. Timing, so pre, during and post. So pre and during for an adolescent rugby player, are they fueled optimally? Are they hydrated? We're not going to be looking at things like reducing carbohydrate intake for mitochondrial biogenesis. That's not important for a rugby player. At the same time, post-training, are they refueling properly? Are they maximising lean mass gains? Type of food, are they hitting the macronutrient and micronutrient intakes? Total, which I'm going to talk a lot about more today, are they hitting their calorie needs? Very, very important. And finally, what I've done is I've adapted the Liverpool John Moore's 3 T's and added an S on the end of it. So sleep quality, sleep length. This is a massive area of emerging research, and it's one of the, I think we all know if we don't get a good night's sleep, it massively affects us, and it affects our young players as well. As I said, I'm going to talk more about total today, but our take-home message from this side is you want to cement and optimise the basics of good nutrition and good sleep if you want your players to get the most out of their training sessions. And to do this, we really want to use contemporary behaviour change science to intervene successfully. We want to avoid the coin term at the bottom there. It seemed like a good idea at the time, so there seems to be very perception in nutrition research. My players might not know to eat protein after training. Let me make an infographic about it. Is that actually the most successful way to make sure they are bringing protein to training post every session? So you want to look at actually more interventive reasons. Right, so energy intake. It's the foundation of diet. If you don't get this right in terms of quantity, you're not going to get anything else right in terms of quality or timings. From the research, we know that during adolescence, they're going through their biggest stages of growth, so their energy requirements are largest. Desbrow et al. Did a really nice study in 2014, or position standard adolescent athletes. They need more energy than any other players or any other teams. If you couple this with the fact that elite adolescent players have large training demands, as I've already explained, it's likely that their energy availability is compromised. Put into the state, this is how much players are changing. So we have under 16 players that come in at 50 or 60 kg. They need to be leaving and ready at 19 years of age to play senior or professional, semi-professional rugby league. That's maybe a change of 30 or 40 kg. This is like realistic changes that we see and we have to try and face. So not only are they meeting their energy demands for training, but for lean mass gains. So it's imperative we assess this. So the first thing to do is why don't we look in the literature, what are players eating? So there's 3 studies that have currently been done, one by Debbie, who's not here today, but she's within the research group. And as you can see, it tends to be that forwards eat more than backs, as you might expect, and that there seem to be no differences between codes. So rugby union, rugby league, you eat the same amount of food, as under 19s eat more than under 16s. Nothing that we don't really already know. If you go to senior literature, you can see positional differences again. Forwards eat more than backs, and they tend to eat anything up to 3,000 to 4,000 calories. But are these methods valid and reliable? So this is a really good study done by James Moran at Liverpool John Moore's University. He was looking at energy intake and energy expenditure. As you can see on the right, that's energy intake, energy expenditure is on the left. From that, you would expect players to lose weight. The players maintained weight despite a 2,000 calorie underreporting. So we're using these methods, but they're not telling us the answers that we're asking them. So if you look at wider nutritional research, not within sport, it's been consistently shown that food diets, traditional methods, 24-hour dietary recalls, food frequency questionnaires lead to random error and systematic error. It's so bad that leading researchers have actually claimed that these methods are fraud or pseudoscience. So why are we using them? Saying that, within adolescent populations, so elite netball players, elite football players done at Northumbria University, they showed that these methods were valid and reliable, so we wanted to see if it was the same when we assessed our players. Unfortunately, we found that they were underreporting by 700 calories. That was with effective behaviour change science used with this method to try and adhere the players and motivate the players to fill out the actual food diet. As you can see there's a mean bias of 700 calories, but the random distribution of the error shows it's an unreliable method as well. So your take-home message is, currently we're using methods to assess what players are eating, but we know they're not actually measuring that accurately. So let's look at the other side of the equation. What are players expending? So what makes up total energy expenditure is resting metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food, neat physical activity, and adaptive thermogenesis. Now I've left outside of the model because it's not really important for players trying to put on weight. Resting metabolic rate, James Moran again did a very good study looking at players' energy expenditures. He found that senior players, you could actually, if you measured the resting metabolic rate, it was underestimated compared to an estimated equation. This doesn't seem to make sense, as players will have a large amount of muscle damage and more lean mass than these equations would allow on. And what we found in our players was that it underestimated. So if you want to work out someone's resting metabolic rate or the energy they need to stay alive at rest, then you need to test it. Thermic effect of food, we know that's about 10%. And then you want to come to the really, really hard thing, or the most variable part of energy expenditure, physical activity. How do we assess that? So you can look at recommendations, you can look at estimated values, but it's an estimated. And the one that's used commonly in the literature is wearable technology. So we've had a lot of research up here spoken about GPS and metabolic power. Now Warren Bradley at Munster Rugby Football Club did some really good stuff with SenseWear. What he found was that players were spending about 3,500 calories. Unfortunately, with a SenseWear armband, you have to take it off during collision, so instantly it underestimates. So we wanted to look at the effect of combining a sensory armband, which players wore outside of the club environment 24/7, and then during training wearing working out metabolic power from a GPS unit. Unfortunately, we found it underestimated total energy expenditure in comparison to our gold criterion measure, W labeled water. So in conclusion of this, if you want to work out resting metabolic rate or the amount of energy someone needs to stay alive, you need to test it in this population. If you want to work out total energy expenditure, the only way to currently do it is to use indirect calorimetry, which is extremely expensive or inaccessible. With the combining of wearable technologies, it gives us a good indication of what players are expending, which is important during injury, etc. But we're probably going to have to test that. Now, I'm very excited to show you this. This is the data we just collected last week, or analysed last week, of what players are expending across a 2-week pre-season. So on the left, you can see James Morgan's data again from senior players, elite players in rugby league. This is what they expended across in-season, where they expended 2 matches. Our data is remarkably similar, considering our players didn't play any matches, they were just in pre-season training. I haven't run the statistics on it yet, but when you control for body weight, I can imagine they're expending roughly the same amount of energy. So again, just to reiterate, I'll explain this first. 10-day training average. So on average, players are expending 5,000 calories on a training day. To put that in perspective, that's 48 bananas on a training day or 32 bananas on a rest day. Huge amounts of energy. You need to make sure your players' nutrition is optimally in place and that they're meeting those demands. So adolescent players have considerable total energy expenditure demands, and more research is really required looking at collision and in-match play. So this is the useful part of the presentation if I've bored you so far. What do you want to get out of it? How do you measure that your players actually are meeting their energy requirements or demands? So we know that measuring diet's inaccurate or invalid. We know that looking at energy expenditure is inaccurate, invalid, or inaccessible, e.g. expensive. So what do? Luckily, Albert Einstein told us about first law of thermodynamics, so energy can only be not created or destroyed, but just move from one form to another. So the calories that you get from food, if you're eating more than you need, you're going to put on weight. If you're eating what you need, you'll maintain weight. If you're not eating enough, you're going to lose weight. So this is where it becomes practical. With your players, you should be regularly and reliably assessing weight. What we do at the club is every Monday morning, the players, this is player driven, so they get up in the mornings before they eat anything, after they've been to the toilet, they text me their weight. After a few weeks, I get a very good indication of who's not eating enough, and then from that, I can drive individual consultation and intervene. So my adolescent gainer, and this is what you'll probably hear from all of your players, I have a ridiculously fast metabolism, it's my genes, it's impossible for me to eat anymore, and these are all practical problems that you're going to face. However, we know that they can eat more, we know that they can address these issues, and to help you do that, you should use contemporary behaviour change science. The Behaviour Change Wheel is an absolute great book, and I'd recommend you get it. To how to intervene successfully. It's 8 steps, it's systematic, it's theoretical, and it's comprehensive, and it's going to help you make sure your players do what you need them to do. So finally, guys, to conclude, elite adolescent players face professional kinematic demands and metabolic stresses coupled with unique adolescent stresses. Traditional measures of energy intake and energy expenditure are inaccessible, invalid, or unreliable. So we need to be using practical measures such as reliable and regular weigh-ins, and this can drive individual consultation. If nothing else, you really want to make sure that your players are adapting and recovering from training sessions as much as possible. So let's get the 3 T's of nutrition right. Are they eating the right amount? Are they eating the right type of foods? Are they having it at the right time? And are they sleeping well enough and for a long enough period? If you do this consistently, your players are going to adapt and develop into the athletes you want them to be. Thank you very much.